When, not if. Written by a random NPC. Read by Arashi. The rain trickled down her face. The day was finally over. A battle fought and won. Fighting was inevitable. The battle was nonetheless extraneous, especially when sending that other emanator to the other side of the river. Aventurine was a tragic soul. While not uncommon for people to explore the unknown, a feeling of sadness would wash over Acheron as she watched the lost souls. The sounds of heels clicking on the ground dragged Acheron from the depth of her thoughts, though the person behind the clicking sounds was not a threat. So, as the sound stopped by her side, Acheron found herself once again spacing out in her ocean of thoughts, staring up at nothingness as the rain pelted down her face. "Do you ever think about death?" Acheron sliced through the silence, almost surprising herself at the sound of her own thoughts out loud. Black Swan let out a thoughtful hum. "I suppose so. Many memories and motivations are based on those who have passed. What about your thoughts about it?" Asking the tough questions tonight, are we?" Black Swan let out an airy chuckle. "It's simply part of the natural process. Even eons die. Does finality not state that the end will be the death of all living beings?" Acheron closes her eyes. The rain is suddenly chilly as it soaks through her clothes. She suppresses a shiver. Indeed. But what if death is not the end, merely the beginning of a new story? Black Swan huffs. "You know more of this than I. Emanator, shall we continue our conversation elsewhere, out of the rain? I have some tea that I could brew for us, to prevent catching a cold." Black Swan sighs. "If death is inevitable, then why delay it? Either way, a cold would merely pass by quickly in a day or two, a fleeting moment in the grand scheme of things." Acheron spits more harshly than she intended. She exhales longingly, opening her eyes again to the sky of the Penacony. No longer does it have the neon glow to it. Rain still falls. We delay the inevitable because with time we can create more memories, take the time that we have to make changes, fulfill our duties, and make way for the future generations. Finality is not going to come for a long time yet. Black Swan bites back, almost as harshly. She takes a deep breath, and Acheron can feel as Black Swan takes a step closer. She stiffens as a hand cups her jaw, but as Black Swan gently sweeps her thumb across her cheek, she relaxes into the touch. "Truly, though, darling, the rain is freezing, and your eyeliner is running, despite the fact that, indeed, this memory will be a fleeting one. I would much rather look back in a more warm environment." Black Swan speaks much softer and gently this time. Black Swan runs her hand down Acheron's arm and finds its way back into her hand. Black Swan's hand is warm and soft, contrasting greatly to the rain. Finally, Acheron looks down and looks at Black Swan. Her cloth hairpiece is drenched, and her bangs are sticking to her forehead. Yet, when she meets her eyes, they soften, and a gentle smile is graced on her lips. This time, Acheron allows herself to shiver in the coldness, despite the heat that is making her blush. When did someone manage to get so close to her? "I guess I can't disagree," Acheron finally mutters, allowing herself to be pulled along with Black Swan. This reminds her of their dance, with Black Swan in the lead. Only this time, Acheron decides to let Black Swan stay in the lead. Time passes in silence, a gentle, comforting one. But eventually, they make it to the place where Black Swan is staying. Why is there a hotel inside the dream, where one is already asleep? Well, the same reason there is food, where one gains no benefit from eating. To simply have a place within the dream, to be where there are no other crowds. The room is small, Surprisingly, there is a small kitchen, a small living room, where a bulky TV sits in the corner. And then, of course, there is the bedroom and bathroom. Black Swan drops her hold on Acheron's hand, and almost immediately she misses the warmth. But she supposes she should follow suit in taking off her heels. "I'll start a kettle of tea, and you can clean yourself off in the meantime." Black Swan nods in the direction of the bathroom. Acheron lets out a hum of agreement as she enters the bathroom and gently closes the door behind her. When she looks in the mirror, she is met with a sad sight. Her hair is dripping and flattened with random pieces sticking out in different directions. Her makeup is indeed running. Perhaps it wasn't just the rain that ruined her eyeliner, as her eyes are slightly rimmed red. She looks down at the sink, a fancy marble white sink, and turns on the faucet. Warm water immediately splashes out, and she rinses off her face. Once she's deemed clean enough, or at least presentable, she steps out, a fluffy purple towel in hand. Black Swan has set her cloth hairpiece aside. The scent of cherry tea fills the room, as Black Swan hums a small tune. Acheron silently hands the towel to Black Swan. She stops humming momentarily, to smile sweetly, as she takes the towel and dries out her long, white hair. As Black Swan does that, Acheron takes a seat across to Black Swan, where a cup is poured out for her. Black Swan stops humming again. "I haven't added any sweeteners or the likes, but you may add any if you so desire." Black Swan folds the towel and puts it off to the side. Her hair is fuzzy, but drier now. "I take my tea without it. But thank you." Acheron nods in gratitude. Black Swan chuckles. "That is where we differ. I can't stand the bitter taste. Plenty of honey enhances the taste and sweetens it." "Honey? I'm afraid I've never put honey in my tea. Granted, I've never been a big tea drinker." Acheron lets out an amused chuckle. Black Swan gasps dramatically. "Just this once. I believe you'll enjoy the taste of honey." Acheron lifts her eyebrows in surprise and amusement as Black Swan grabs her teacup and pours some honey in the cup. After a stir, the honey is dissolved as if it never was there. Black Swan gives back her teacup, carefully observing Acheron as she cautiously takes a sip. The taste is, of course, sweeter, but the flavor of the honey mixes well with tea, creating a sweet and tangy taste. Acheron lets it sit on her tongue for a moment long, despite it still being relatively hot still. After a decisive moment, while the sweetness was pleasant, much better than sugar or cream, she preferred the near-bitter taste of plain tea. "It is nice," Acheron simply says. "No need to honey your words. I can tell you like it without the honey." Black Swan let out an airy laugh, one that made Acheron's mouth twitch upwards. But she was quick to hide that and the rising blush behind another sip of tea. "While I do enjoy it more than sugar, you are right. I prefer it plain still," Acheron said, decisively after setting her tea back on the platter. "Well, we can't agree on everything, I suppose." Black Swan sighed, a fond sigh. Black Swan set her hand down on the table, resting her chin on the palm of her other hand. "Say, where were we when we stepped out of the rain?" Acheron hummed thoughtfully, but truthfully, her mind came up blank. She set her hand down, on top of Black Swan's. "Oh, death, right?" Black Swan nodded to herself, merely glancing at their hands in acknowledgement for a moment, before glancing back up at Acheron. "Ah, there are memories from merely an hour ago." Acheron nodded. They talked for hours. Or maybe it was only minutes. The sky did not change in the dream, and the only sense of time that had passed was the tea that had gone cold. Throughout their conversation, they shifted topics, from death to more mundane things, such as preferences for food. Mid-sentence, Black Swan interrupted herself in a yawn. "Ah, I should thank you for the tea and company, but I should leave you to rest." Acheron stood up and took a step when Black Swan grabbed her wrist and stood up as well. "Thank you for staying as well. Perhaps you could stay. You must be more exhausted than I. I only have one bed, but there is plenty of room for the both of us." Black Swan almost begged, bringing her other hand to effectively trap one of Acheron's hands. Weighing her options, Acheron concedes, with no regrets as Black Swan grins at her, a bright, radiant smile. "Do you have an extra set of sleepwear?" Acheron asks as they make their way to the bedroom. "Of course. I can do your hair for you as well." Do my hair?" Acheron furrows her eyebrows in confusion. "Do you not know how you should wear your hair up to prevent it from frizzing overnight?" Black Swan eyes her hair curiously. "Working as a galaxy ranger." Black Swan gently pinches Acheron. "As an emanator. I've never put much thought into something as trivial as hair," Acheron admitted. "Well then, while you change, I'll be right back." Black Swan shook her head in disbelief as she walked towards the bathroom. Once they both were changed, and Black Swan had her hair up in her own high bun, they situated themselves on the bed, so Acheron was seated between Black Swan's legs as she gently brushed out her hair. As predicted, Acheron's hair was frizzy due to the rain, as well as split ends that haunted the ends of her hair, and while still soft, it was more brittle in some spots. Silence once again filled the air. The only sounds were the sounds of the brush running through Acheron's hair, and the occasional yawn. "Black Swan?" A pause in the brushing. "Do you think you could hum again? Whatever you were humming earlier?" "Of course." The brushing resumed, and the atmosphere was filled with a gentle hum, a lullaby from distant lands, perhaps from where Black Swan came from. It almost makes Acheron feel like a child with her mother. Of course, Acheron never knew her mother, but this made her feel whole, a missing piece that came to her again. Despite that, they sat in a quiet room, and even the outside was quiet, and it was reminiscent of the nothingness void that is nihility. Yet it felt like everything to Acheron, like a wound that was finally scarring, or like an itch finally scratched. The brushing paused again, as her hair was sectioned out into 3 pieces, and then those sections were brushed again. Black Swan set down the brush and began braiding her hair, gently tugging here and there to ensure the braid was snug. Once the band was snapped on the bottom of the braid, Black Swan gently swept the braid around, so it laid across Acheron's shoulder and over her front. "Now we can sleep." Black Swan let out an amused chuckle. Acheron let out a hum of acknowledgement, and she gently leaned back into Black Swan. Her exhaustion swept over her, and her limbs felt like lead. Even with the intense training she had endured, now, in this peace and domestication, she feels tiredness sweep through her. She doesn't find it in her to move off and claim her side of the bed, despite the fact that there was enough room for them both. But she found she really didn't care. Black Swan was like a warm radiator, and she didn't make any move to push Acheron off either. So she let herself fully lean into Black Swan as she lowered them down, so they were laying down. The braid feels weird, like an uncomfortable lump to shift around, but Acheron manages as she twists herself so her stomach is on Black Swan, as Black Swan pulls the covers over them. In this moment, Acheron dislikes that Black Swan oh so reverently takes care of her hair and pulling it up. Acheron mourns the loss of not being able to gently run her fingers through the no doubt silky soft and smooth strands of Black Swan's hair. But all grievances are forgiven, as Black Swan embraces Acheron, pulling her close. With Acheron safely tucked in Black Swan's side, using her more than the mattress, and laying her head in the crook of Black Swan's neck. She is flooded with the scent of cherry tea and cherry blossoms. As Acheron drifts to sleep, she dreams of flying swans and falling pink petals. Acheron awakes a little confused. The late night, or whatever time it may be, or have been, was a blur. But she looks up, and still she is tucked closely by Black Swan. The bun she wore to bed is slightly mused, and a bit of drool hangs out her mouth as she softly snores. Acheron smiles to herself, reaching up to gently brush some hair that escaped the bun out of Black Swan's face. Acheron sighs happily to herself again, before drifting off once again. She awakes again, not long after. But this time, the bed is empty. Only some leftover heat from where Black Swan slept was left. But now, the smell of bacon and eggs entered her senses as she sat up, rubbing the remnants of sleep from her eyes. Getting up, she quickly found Black Swan working at the stove, eggs and bacon being plated. "Ah, you're awake. Would you like breakfast?" Black Swan looked hopefully at Acheron. Acheron took note that her bun was refreshed, so it was neat and tidy. She nodded. She might as well if Black Swan was going to put in the work. She may have never had a mother, nor father that she remembered, but she still had manners. They sat down. The eggs and bacon were fatty, but delicious nonetheless. The clanking of forks on plates filled the air as they ate their meal. Acheron couldn't remember the last time she shared a meal with someone, or even a peaceful morning where she sat to enjoy the meal. Once they were finished, Acheron took it on herself to clean the dishes, though it felt less like being polite and more like an excuse to bask in Black Swan's presence. They made idle chatter, mostly Black Swan, talking about what she's going to do, and Acheron adding her inputs here and there. They talked as Black Swan got dressed in her usual attire, and Acheron finished cleaning the dishes. Once the dishes were cleaned, Black Swan pulled her to the bathroom, where she undid the braid. Her purple hair splayed out, but instead of its usual straight mess, it was more tame, and even had gentle curls here and there. Black Swan gently raked her fingers through her hair, nodding her head in approval. But all things come to an end. Acheron was now in her usual attire as well, and they stood by the door, facing each other. Black Swan had a small, sad smile on her face. Acheron more or less felt the same. As fleeting as the memory may be, Acheron hopes this is one that she'll manage to remember. Once again, hands came up to cup her cheek, a touch she quickly learned to appreciate. Black Swan held her gaze, strong and steady. Acheron brought her hands up, both to cup Black Swan's cheeks. They stared at each other for a moment, barely breathing, like a single thing could shatter this bubble they've made around themselves. Black Swan placed her other hand on Acheron's shoulder and gently pushed her face forward. Acheron met her halfway. Black Swan tasted of honey and smelled like cherries. Acheron deepened the kiss, leaning forward even more, bringing one of her hands to run through Black Swan's hair. It was indeed very soft. No blanket or bed could compare. They pulled away reluctantly. Acheron felt like her cheeks were on fire, but she didn't mind. Black Swan had a gentle blush that highlighted her beauty. Acheron sighed softly. Black Swan smiled sweetly. Black Swan brought her hand up again, gently sweeping across Acheron's bottom lip. "My lipstick suits you. You look good in red." Black Swan joked light-heartedly. Acheron, too, let out a soft laugh. "I suppose this is where we part ways?" Acheron nodded, but still smiled fondly at Black Swan. "When we see each other again, will you braid my hair again? I'll bring my own tea I'd like to share." "Of course. And if you truly mean it, when, not if." we see each other again. Yes. When? Not if. I'll be waiting then. For when? Not if. With a promise in their hearts and their souls lightened, they parted ways, until the next time they cross paths again.